When the story of Jomo Kenyatta's ascent to president is told, little is said of the family of former senior chief Njiri wa Karanja. However, the paramount chief and his sons, staunch defenders of the colonial government, contributed significantly to Kenyatta becoming head of state. Born in 1866, Karanja was a wealthy landowner by the time white settlers arrived and protected his interests by working for the colony when it was formed in 1920. Such was his political stature that when Queen Elizabeth traveled to Kenya in 1957, 5 years after Karanja had retired, she visited him at his home in Fort Hall, now Murang'a. His political support was critical in ensuring colonial officials warmed up to Kenyatta. The close relationship between Karanja and Kenyatta, which began long before independence, has been cited as one of the reasons his son Kariuki Njiri vacated his legislative council seat for the former president in 1961 after he was released from detention. Had Kariuki not given up the seat, the Kenyatta story would have been confined to the footnote of history. Karanja's son, Mr. Mbeyu Njiri, said Kenyatta visited the chief often in the 1940s. When Kenyatta was teaching at the Kenya Teachers College in Githunguri, he was in contact with my father and visited him regularly, said Mbeyu. They remained close friends even during his imprisonment at Kapenguria and after becoming the president. Ironically, Karanja is best remembered as the former paramount chief who smashed his lying radio when it announced Kenyatta was free. The anecdote is used to mock loyalist Kikuyu reactions to the 1961 release of a man they had denounced as part of the Mau Mau. However, his family says the 1956 incident is taken out of context. His anger was triggered by a propaganda broadcast claiming his friend Kenyatta, who was in detention, was back in the country. The same radio station had a year earlier broadcast that Kenyatta had left Kikuyu land and would never return again. When Kenyatta emerged from 7 years in detention and became president of newly formed KANU party, he needed to be in the LegCo to participate in the constitutional talks being held in London in 1962. The Legislative Council was the heart of African efforts to force changes at the Lancaster House Conference in the lead-up to self-government and later independence in 1963. Following the proclamation of a state of emergency in 1952 by Sir Evelyn Baring, governor of colonial Kenya, Kenyatta and 5 others had been held captive in Kapenguria. The 6 were charged with managing Mau Mau, a radical movement trying to push the British administration out of Kenya. Stuck in detention, Kenyatta missed elections in 1961, but KANU and KADU, the parties formed after the first Lancaster House meetings, pledged to secure his release and ensure he assumed a position of leadership. In August that year, the former president was freed but remained outside the vital team negotiating the terms for full independence. On December 21st, 1961, at a KANU annual conference, it was announced that Kenyatta will stand for a constituency seat in Fort Hall, which Kariuki Njiri represented. Kariuki vacated the Kigumo seat 6 days later. Oddly, no other KANU member in the LegCo or Kenyatta's Kiambu backyard was willing to make such a sacrifice, not even his brother-in-law Koinange. In his book, The Illusion of Power, veteran politician Gigi Kariuki writes, Kenyatta ally Tom Mboya, who held a seat in Nairobi and had offered to do was reluctant to keep his promise because he knew that stepping down for his parliamentary position would have meant cutting short his own political career. His political enemies would not have received his resignation as a gesture of good faith, but rather as a final defeat. In the by-election on January 1962, Kenyatta was elected for the legislative seat without contest, setting off his meteoric rise. From June 1963 to December 1964, Kenyatta was the first prime minister, head of government, as Queen Elizabeth remained the head of state. In December 1964, he became the first president of independent Kenya. Njiri said Kenyatta and his father were so close that even after he was released from detention, he traveled to Kinyona village in Murang'a to see the collaborator chief. For this, celebrated author Ngugi wa Thiong'o, who later described Kenyatta as a black Moses who had been called by history but failed to rise to the occasion and ended up surrounding himself with colonial chiefs, home guards, and traitors. As a senior chief, Njiri was infamous for hostility towards anti-colonialists during his tenure from 1901 to 1952. Those who remember him vividly say he was a ruthless man who never hesitated to destroy those opposed to the unpopular British regime. During the state of emergency, when he was a retired paramount chief, he assisted the British in cracking the whip on Mau Mau, recalls 79-year-old Lucy Wanjiku. He flew over the land calling for the surrender of forest fighters lest they face the wrath of the colonial soldiers and home guards. Njiri's son Mbiyu was named Kiambu Senior Chief Koinange wa Mbiyu as a show of friendship between the two paramount chiefs. Koinange's daughter Grace Wahu was Kenyatta's first wife, according to Ezekiel Mwangi Kanyungi, who served as Kangari assistant chief under Njiri's son Kigo between 1952 and 1963. A shared ancestry of their fathers maybe contributed to this move. Kenyatta's father Ngegi wa Muigai and Chief Njiri's father Karanja wa Njiri, he claims, hailed from Ngenda village in Murang'a but moved to Gatundu and Kigumo respectively. Their father's common origin apparently bonded them, and so Njiri and Kenyatta remained close friends, said Mwangi. Njiri was born in 1856 and Kenyatta in 1890s. I think this friendship, coupled with the same origin, contributed to the sacrifice by Kariuki. Njiri's son Kariuki had schooled at the Lincoln University in the United States with the likes of Kwame Nkrumah, Ghana's first president, and Nnamdi Azikiwe, Nigeria's first president. He was a beneficiary of Operation Crossroads Africa, a forerunner to the other efforts to airlift African students to the US for further education. He returned to Kenya in the mid-1950s with his American wife, Ruth Sturz, who later served as President Kenyatta's personal secretary between 1961 and 1968. Kariuki took an interest in politics before independence, but his future seemed doomed because he was the son of brutal colonial collaborator. Because his father had more than 40 wives, the connection was not immediately apparent. To fool voters, he changed his name to Kariuki wa Mwingi, Kariuki, son of the people, and won the legislative seat. He later gave up for Kenyatta. After independence, when Kenyatta became a national leader, Kariuki got back his seat and served the Kigumo constituency until 1969 elections, when he reacted with defiance when his identity was uncovered. It is claimed he defiantly stated, "Since when did the crowd birth a child I am not a son of the people. I am son of Chief Njiri wa Karanja. He lost the Kigumo seat to JFC Munene. Kariuki served as assistant minister for local government and later wildlife and natural resources. He died in 1975 following a road accident at Juja, a year after his father's death. 4 years after Karanja Njiri died at 180 years, Kenyatta followed him to the grave. These are the home guards who helped Jomo Kenyatta ascend to power.